brother looked, so. Again, your brother looked.
Isn't there a giant Jarvis down here?
I don't know.
Not anymore.
No?
Not anymore.
They're all up there now.
Oh.
More up there.
See? Yeah, your brother looked, so he said no. That's why I wasn't sure. Should I trust him?
He's
Should I
up for
not
the
trust
sign
him?
too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I probably walked by him, pulled it up, put it on the door, just walked away.
Oh, Amy, on the next door act, a lot of people are really complaining about the property tax hike.
Oh,
And they can't all be conservatives either, I don't believe. Huh?
Who does that?
It'll pass.
Who does that?
Better than living in Virginia.
How much is?
Oh, that's gonna get worse here in Virginia.
They're going crazy over there.
Yep.
Really?
What?
Okay.
Pennsylvania? North Carolina?
Jonathan, you're not eating?
Yes,
He
sir.
did.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Testing, testing.
Jonathan and Paul
Little loud?
both
No,
loved the
it's fine.
pizza.
Oh, that pizza was delicious. Nice and Bert. Testing, 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 testing.
Yes, we hear you.
Testing, 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 testing.
Who got
Testing,
the
testing.
storm yesterday?
Testing, testing, testing.
The public schools, cause they went out early because of the storm.
I know.
His lady friend was
Frederick got hit pretty hard.
It happened yesterday
Rockville got
morning.
this, except the winds on 8:30
Yesterday.
really picked up and for like
Where
40
did the
minutes, they
storm
were
go?
just.
Debbie, do we need to do
Where?
some marriage counseling?
Good question.
He's not, oh, he's working.
Uh-huh.
But they closed the road.
What is that? What's that thing on, what's that orangish,
If he's not working, he's riding a bike.
What?
oh, it's
Where's
dessert.
Gio?
What?
What?
She got a cold.
It's 7:30.
She doesn't wanna spread it to the elderly.
Welcome to our Tuesday night Bible study, at 7:30.
Oh, thank you.
Everyone out there on YouTube, are we live, Craig? We should be live.
Yeah.
So, thanks for joining us tonight. You missed some great, chili and rice and a dessert Rabbi made with custard, General Custard. And,
It's supposed to be an eclair.
and
Like an
Eclair, thank you, Eclair, and then someone brought some other goodies, so, you're missing out if you're not here on Tuesday night. Anyway, last week we finished up, It's God a Moral Monster, so usually before we go between series, I always like to talk about something a little more lighthearted.
With what?
Yeah, well, it's better than,
It was easy.
it's better than what
Then you could
Revelation,
swim
the
forever.
Wrath of Revelation, yeah, but anyway, yeah. Yeah, that was unintended for me to say that.
He's a comedian, he just doesn't know it.
So anyway, we'll begin. This is going to be a little different than the last two others I've done over the years, so I've just sort of added additional material. But anyway, we'll begin. There's 113 slides, so
Wow.
yeah.
We'll be here all night.
And usually, well, that's why usually we start around 7 when we do this, but this time I think I cut the narration out, so that should help a bit. That should, yeah. Anyway,
They
All
were
right.
eating and drinking and making merry and giving in narrative.
kind of like we are. Well, yeah.
No, we are not doing that.
We're not doing that, but we definitely are eating and drinking liquids.
Maybe
not-
other
not
people
liquor
are.
or hard drink. Anyway, yeah, so, Yeshua's disciples came and they asked him this question. This is what was going to be like at the end of the age, and what to say. For the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. All right, so what was the pre-flood world like? We don't know a whole lot, but we're given little bits of hints here and there. It says there was no rain.
No need for umbrellas.
Yep, only springs watered the earth. It says the Lord God had not sent rain, but streams came up from the earth and watered the whole surface of the ground. So you could imagine there were probably really no mountains during those times, or hills. I'm going to revise this bullet. I used to think there was maybe possibly a thick canopy of moisture covering the towers, which is true, but I don't know about a thick canopy. I believe I'm more geared to believe it was a layer of ice, and I'll tell you why. Thick canopy would be like a thick, heavy fog, and I don't think so, because another apocryphal book, it says that they could look at the stars and constellations, so you can't see stars and sun and moon over a thick layer of fog. So I think it was literally a layer of ice covering up in the stratosphere. But anyway, let's see what the Word of God says. So he says, waters under the heaven in one place, land, and then after the flood, he says, I have set my rainbow in the clouds. So you only get a rainbow when you have sunlight, right, hitting moisture
Yeah.
in the atmosphere. So most likely rolling hills. Again, I'm just surmising here. Maybe small mountains. No high mountains. And I doubt there were any deep valleys either. We can look at Psalms 104:5-8, which I think we do later in the slides. Civilizations, I'm not going to say may have existed, I'm pretty confident, existed in areas which today are covered by seas and oceans. The fable of the lost city of Atlantis could have been real. All right, so what was it like? It tells us it was a lush paradise. Water came up from the ground. You see a spring there. And there's some references in the Old Testament about in the Garden of Eden being like the land of Goshen in Egypt, very lush, very fertile, beautiful plants. All right, so what have they discovered? What do we know? And this has been going on for now many decades, and they're pretty confident there's more water under the earth than on top of the earth, in the oceans and the seas and lakes. So there's more water underneath, a couple hundred miles down, than we have on the surface. And this is different groups, even up to Japanese, have also come up with this conclusion. So we shouldn't be surprised if it, when we read later that he brought up waters, he opened up the fountains of the deep to flood the earth.
Well, how far down here do you have to go to get a well? Not all that far in some places.
Yeah, but I mean, we're talking about water that exceeds the Atlantic, Pacific, Bering
Yeah.
Seas, all the lakes. That's a lot of water.
Yeah, under Saudi Arabia, almost the entire country is this very deep aquifer, but they're artesian wells. So the water is thousands of years old, and then they bottle it. That's some of the water we had in Iraq.
Okay.
But now, currently, it only rains like, I think 10 or 12 inches a year in Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
But in ancient times, it was a lush garden.
Okay. Yeah, in some cases they find water locked in these little crystals, but there's just immense amounts of it. So it's about 700 kilometers below the earth. So it's a blue rock called ringwoodite. But again, there's aquifers. They're pretty confident that there's more water again. I've said this over and over, so we'll move on. So what do we have in Psalms 24:2? It says, for he laid the earth's foundation on the seas and built it on the ocean's depth. What's the first thing we see that he created when he did the earth? What was the earth like? It was water, right? It says the Spirit of God hovered over the waters, and then he brought up the land from the waters. So again, just some pictures, illustrations that I believe there's a lot more water underneath than there is on top of the earth. So what's this? The Bimini Islands off the coast of Florida. Well, they found these cobbled stones. They go out, I think, like a mile and a half. Definitely say they're man-made. This is not random natural because they just stick out of nowhere. And you look at it from far and it's like a little path. So what's this man-made thing doing there in about, I think it's 30 or 40 feet of water? They even have people go swim there and take pictures. Well, we'll get to that in a little bit. What could that be? Also, off the coast of Japan, they found this temple here. Now, of course, there's websites that say, no, this is a natural formation. Look, anyway, they have tourists, scuba divers go down, take pictures. They have stones, a little picture there, main terrace, upper terrace, triangular pool, turtles, or at least what look like turtles. I haven't been there, I haven't seen it myself, but I'm going to take it for what most believe this is some kind of temple they try to create. And at least they fooled the tourists, because and this is about a couple miles out into the ocean, and I think it's about 200 feet of water, so it's pretty deep. All right, so
Much farther down.
they discovered this when they go out to explore, look for oil out in the Bering Sea, or not, Baltic Ocean, Baltic Sea. These, sound penetrating radar, and anyway, they came up with this, and they're like, what is this thing? Well, it's not the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars. It looks very much like it, though. But no, it's called the Baltic Sea anomaly. It's discovered in June of 2011 by the Ocean X team. Again, that's because they're looking for oil wells. And you read the article and say, look, this is not a natural thing. This is in the middle of this sandy, silty bottom, and these are man-made. The dimensions, the cuts, the angles. So, what's it doing out there between Finland and Sweden? We'll get to it. Where are my slides out of place? Boy, this is scary. Okay, anyway, let me see what happened here. 'Cause this is a little odd. Why is this here?
Oh, it's a sea monster.
It's definitely out of place. How did it end up there? Well, we're
wasn't
gonna have to
paying
fly. We'll improvise. We'll get to it. All right.
Paul wasn't paying attention when he put his slides together.
No, it wasn't. It's just.
He was upset.
No, I did this before I got upset. So it's just been sitting in my hard drive for a while. All right. So we're talking about Noah's flood. Now let's talk about Noah's Ark. It says it was how many cubits? 300 cubit. Now there's two kinds of cubits. There's the Egyptian cubit and the Israeli cubit. Now who wrote Genesis? Who wrote Genesis? Usually we think it's Moses, right? Moses. Well, let's just go with Moses. Moses was raised what?
Egyptian.
Egyptian. So he's probably using the Egyptian cubit image, which I think is like 21 point some inches as opposed to 18.9 inches, which is the Israeli cubit. But anyway, it turns to be about 500 feet. Big boat, but compare it in size to the Santa Maria, the ones that the Spanish settlers, Christopher Columbus came out. Much larger than that. So it's a little over 500 feet compared to the Queen Mary II, which is almost 1,100 feet. As we go back further in time, we see that they built some huge ships. These are the Chinese junks, junk, humongous. They could hold a couple hundred people in there, almost 450 feet in size. So don't think they were master shipbuilders way back then. About how many animals, what kinds could have gone into the ark, right? It says he says bring two of a kind, right? Two of a kind. So a kind is different than what is it? Sparrows and short-beaked sparrows and long-beaked sparrows, they're all the same kind, right? They're just different varieties, but they can interbreed. So, Noah's Ark's dimensions, again, we said about 510 feet, 85 feet wide, 51 feet high. He said only animals that breathe through their nostrils on the ark. So did seals go into the ark?
No.
How do seals breathe?
Through their nostrils.
Through the nostrils. So yes, they were in the ark.
They're mammals.
God told Noah to bring the kinds, not all land and air varieties. We see that in Genesis 7:2-3. So some will say, well, how could he put all animals? No, he just needed the kinds, and we'll get to why he would have said that. How about dinosaurs? We've talked about this one before. Them probably too. And even dinosaurs are probably still around today. And we'll get to that. So now, do you think Noah brought into the ark fully grown adult animals or juveniles? Which would make the most sense? Who would last the longest and reproduce the most once they got after a year? Yeah, juveniles, yeah, of course. So this is a fact, this is nothing new, and this you can even get this off the American Kennel Society website. All dogs originated from one ancestor, and you can trace their DNA. And what is it? The gray wolf. So from the Chihuahua to the beautiful Boxer Pit Lab mix, they're all, and the German Shepherd, they're all descendants of the gray wolf.
It's not there.
Yeah, even this, I think it's called the teacup chihuahua. Again, it's the son of the gray wolf. And there's the gray wolf. And yep, 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 yep. Yeah, go ahead, make my day. Horses. Oh, Noah would have had to just bring one type of horse, and you can get all different breeds. Again, if from a gray wolf you can get these little dogs this big, you should not be surprised that naturally you can get these varieties of horses. All they needed to do was, they can come from one a pair of horses. I think he said bring 7 of each kind, right? 7 pairs?
7 of every clean animal.
Oh, clean animals, that's for offering sacrifice, and okay. So there we see that even back then they had to offer sacrifices, the clean animals, before the law was given. So yep. All right, so where did the term dinosaur come from? Well, in 1841, Richard Owen gave a talk about British fossils to the British Association for Advancement of Science meeting. So they already were digging up fossils and putting them in museums and places, drawings. What do you think they called them before he came up with the name dinosaur? They had to have had a name. What do you think they were? Dragons, yeah. Okay, that's known. No, dragons. And if you can find old dictionaries from 1800s, they're still around, you can see the definition of dragon, and it'll tell you mythical creature, and then some that are still alive today, might still be alive today.
That's why we had dragon slayers.
Yeah. Dragons. Okay, so yep, we said dragons. Should it be any coincidence that the Chinese calendar has 11 animals that we don't question of their existence, but one of them is what? A dragon. So really the word dinosaur wasn't coined until 1842. Prior to this date, the word used for such mighty reptiles was dragon. In fact, the terms dragon and dinosaur were used interchangeably in scientific writings throughout the 19th century. So what does dinosaur mean? Dino means terrible, saur is lizard, powerful. So let's see, China today, where dragon history is very rich, scientists still refer to the animals as dragons. Contrary to popular thought, a dinosaur is a relatively new word and therefore is not found in the Bible, just as neither is automobile or computer.
But dragon is.
Yeah, okay, let's see, understand, no one in all of world history believed that there were dinosaurs before 1842, but everyone believed in the historical evidence of dragons because almost every single culture around the world has historical evidence of dragons. So this is Sir Richard
That's a
Owen.
dragon.
So some dinosaurs are pretty big. Again, would it make sense for Noah to put those large ones, because a couple of those and they'll be eating everything and it'll get messy in the boat and heavy, and you bring in the smallest ones. So the largest dinosaur eggs found, which they believe could be one of these two, which are the largest ones they believe ever existed, are no more bigger than a football. So you can imagine a young juvenile dinosaur as large as that wouldn't be much bigger than a football. And that's the kind I would think he would have put juveniles in the ship. All right, so how about dinosaurs today? We see plenty of evidence, hieroglyphics all around. This is in Blanding, Utah. That doesn't look like a camel. That's an awfully long tail.
That's in my sermon. That exact picture is in my
Oh,
sermon for Saturday.
sorry about stealing. Peru, they discovered the Ica stones. They have hundreds of these. They're called Ica burial stones. There are some fake ones out there, and of course there's always naysayers that say, no, these are fake. But anyway, there's hundreds of them. Some people have them in local museums here and their own little collections. And they depict Inca life. And a lot of this Inca life is, I want you to notice how he looks, okay? Just make a mental note of his nose, his helmet, his hat, whatever it is. The dinosaur, he looks like he's hunting the dinosaur. But you see these Inca stones, they have kind of engraved kind of the day in the life of just what's going on in that Inca culture. Some of them, they show them doing brain surgery. And other ones, they do kind of dirty things I'm not going to talk about. But anyway, now in Acamburo, Mexico, they were digging up, I think, a foundation for a house, and they came across hundreds of these figurines, clay figurines. What do these look like? Look at that guy there in the top corner there. Look how he looks so much similar to this guy here in Peru. And that's, again, from Mexico to Peru, that's many, many thousands of miles. So why would these people draw these animals, we know what this is, a triceratops, this looks like a stegosaurus. Why in the world would they draw these?
Unless they saw them.
Exactly, unless they saw them. Look, here they're trying to, looks like they're trading little baby ones.
Rabbi, you be having fun petting this dinosaur.
I would be petting dinosaurs.
Yeah, look, he's petting his pet dinosaur there, you know,
We
but,
would not be married.
but notice this weird hat he has, this little thing here, very much like the ones we see in Peru. I just found it very interesting that there's similarities there. They found petrified triceratops skin or stegosaurus skin. They saw it was bumpy, but they noticed when they were looking at the Inca stones of the triceratops, or maybe it was the stegosaurus, they saw the same circular patterns. And when they found petrified skin of one, it matches exactly what they have in the drawings. It looks like they were pretty colorful animals, you know, they had nice designs, markings on them. Here's another one eating a person, don't take it off. See again, they have these little spots. You know, they don't show that in the books, did they? Just show them one drab color, but it looks like they had markings on it. And I think I suspect these are probably, you know what, maybe they were tamed and this is markings they put on the people, I don't know. Here you see they're hunting one, they're killing it there, and it's attacking another person. This is looks like a kind of Tyrannosaurus rex, pterodactyl, stegosaurus, triceratops, kind of brontosaurus they're eating. What does he look like he's eating here?
Bananas.
No.
No, palm tree.
No, palm trees have their palms on top. This has, huh?
Coconuts.
I think it looks more like corn. Doesn't corn come from South America?
Maize.
Maize, thank you,
Yeah.
maize. Yeah, that's what it looks like to me. Someone could look it up on their phone what maize looks like, but I think that's kind of what it looks like. So they're not that tall, right? If it's eating that, lifting it, looks like it lifted it off the ground. Maybe that's the roots. But they weren't as big as I don't think they were in the dinosaur age. That was pretty big. Marco Polo talks about this type of dinosaur and his travels and how they used to hunt. They used to live in caves. It would come out at night. So what they would do is they would see its path because it would drag behind its tail or its underbelly. So they would just put a sharp, like razor axe, you know, blade in the ground there. And as it would go through, it would slice itself, die a day later, and then apparently it's
Everybody would eat.
what is it that was very powerful? One of its intestines. I think it's bladder, gallbladder. Its gallbladder was so powerful. It says that someone who was well into having rabies could take a potion of that, and they'd be cured of rabies. Okay, some more pictures. I think they're writing in. Look, you know, don't play around with it. It'll bite your leg. So it seems like you're trying to tame it. I don't know what's going on, but clearly the thing got upset. You know, I'm more inclined to think these are markings that they put on them, more than natural. Because look here, I don't think that's natural. I think they painted them. Honestly, just I don't know why.
Ownership.
All right, one of the oldest artifacts we have is a sun artifact, I believe from ancient Egypt. And you see those two long-necked dinosaurs there. So this is a temple in, I think it's in India. It's one, Malaysia or Indonesia, I think. That's a Triceratops. It's one of those, or Stegosaurus. 1922, this washed up off the coast of Santa Cruz. It was a decomposing, so the judge and the sheriff came out and said, this is a plesiosaur. We thought these things died, 260 million years ago. What's it doing here washed up on the shore? It was pretty decaying, but still, you could see its neck was a good 50 feet long to its body. They took pictures. The original picture disappeared from the Berkeley archives, never to be found again, but they're all over the internet. Plesiosaur, that's the best fit to it. 1977, a Japanese trawler off the coast of New Zealand in about 900 feet of water. They were dragging a net, and they pulled up this big old 30, I think it was, I don't know how many tons. It was about 35 feet long. They put it on shore. Luckily, they happened to have a marine biologist. So, immediately he started drawing it and examining it, and then phoned back to Japanese university there and said, look, we have a plesiosaur here. Decomposing, but it was so smelly, so much pus was oozing out on the deck there that they said there's no way we're keeping this thing here weeks as we go back to Japan. So
Ain't enough ice.
he took pictures, drawings, detailed drawings, and they they couldn't stand the smell, so they pushed it back out into the ocean. But here's a drawing of it. And later that year, the Japanese government commemorated this event by issuing this stamp here, see, 1877, 1977. So even the own Japanese government recognized that this was a plesiosaur. So this animal should have been dead, you know, extinct hundreds of millions of years ago. What's it still doing around? Of course, there's always naysayers who go, oh, no, that's a rare form of the basking shark. This is the skeleton of a basking shark. This is what a basking shark looks like. They're pretty big. They're plankton eaters. Or they'll say it's a rare form of a Bard's beaked whale. Whatever, you know, I don't see a 15-foot long neck there. So of course you're always going to have people are going to say that. Who's this guy here? Charles Lyell. Charles Lyell, he's kind of, I think he was a lawyer, Scottish geologist, but really I think trained more a lawyer. And he noticed when traveling through the English canals, he noticed on the sides of the canals there were layers of rocks, of sediment that ran along the canal's edge. And he came up with a concept that each layer corresponded to an epoch in time. And he gave them names. So he's what I call one of the God haters, along with Karl Marx. Who's that one? He had a fascination with earthworms, Sigmund Freud. He was a real freaky little guy. Emmanuel Cleaver, I won't talk about him, you can look him up. He's the one that did that prayer back in like 2021, double masked and had the most woke prayer ever heard in the halls.
What was his name again?
Representative Emmanuel Cleaver. Just go on YouTube and listen to his opening prayer. Just do it before you eat food, okay? It's bad. So yeah, here we go, the English canals, and he would notice, Charles Lyell would notice, oh, this corresponds to this one epoch, this goes back a couple, 100 million years to this, and he gave them names. All names we know here, like, Holocene, Pleistocene, names we know, right? Pennsylvanian, Mississippian, Devonian, from Devonshire, these are just all names, Cambrian, and he labeled them with ages. So, in the Devonian period, you should have this fish here, the coelacanth, so that should be a long, long time ago.
I can still remember.
But, so here it is, the coelacanth, 360 million years ago from the late Devonian low-fin fish. There's only one problem. In 1948, off the coast of India, they were running across these at night and doing diving. And they're kind of deep sea fish, but they come out at night, more towards the shallows. And they happen to have the exact same skeletal structure as the encompassed, fossilized coelacanth. So what's going on here? How did this, and you'll read the article and their explanation was like, oh wow, this thing survived 360 million years. It didn't change in evolution. No, they were always around. They were one of the species of fish that was not wiped out during the flood. So here we go. This is what's called hydrological sorting. What we see is these layers, right, that go up and down. And you might be wondering, well, how are these formed? You see some layers here. This is obviously a layer of coal. Now, a layer of coal is made of usually plant matter, trees matter. Oil is made from animal matter.
What about diamonds?
Diamonds are a girl's best friend. All right, so let's look at what they found while digging for coal. Miners digging into a coal seam in Fisher Canyon, Pershing County, Nevada, found the shoe prints so clear traces of the sewed thread can be seen. Andrew Thomas, We Are Not First, 1970, page 24. Footprints found of 16 to 24, this is feet, beneath the surface. It was 11 strata of rock. Again, what are the strata of rock? It's these stratas. So they're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, wherever they were. So footprints found 16 to 24 feet beneath the surface near Managua, Nicaragua. Also traces of domesticated dog and horse footprints. No dogs or horses found when Spanish conquistadors first explored the region. Sir David Brewster found an iron nail and a crustaceous block from Mesozoic era. Well, we saw what the Mesozoic era is. It's just a man-made, it's made up, Mesozoic era. Where is it? Do we see it here? Mesozoic? Miocene,
It's
maybe?
in the middle, it's in the middle, going up and down.
It says
It's Jurassic.
Jurassic.
Oh, okay, I see
Jurassic.
that, yeah, thank you, I understand. Okay, just wanted to point it out where it is, and again, this only exists in the textbook, this naming and these timing.
Right.
There's an explanation for why you tend to find clams at the lower levels and as the animals progress higher, but we'll get to that later. So let me just go forward. So let's see, he found a nail found in the block of stone, reported while mining for gold here in Wood, found pieces of auriferous quartz in California 1851. When quartz actually dropped, a perfect nail head was found inside the quartz. Bronze coin found in depths of 114 feet near Chillicothe, Illinois by well drillers in 1871. So 1871, who could have, 114 feet deep, that's really deep. That tells me if that was a pre-flood civilization, what were they using for currency? Coins. You see some of these layers can now be a little bent. Well, what's going on here? Well, how does rock make a right angle without cracking? These are questions we need to ask. Again, there was a point when all of this was really soft. So during the flood, while the earth was in upheaval and mountains were rising, it shouldn't be surprising that soft soil got compacted like an accordion, and where you get these weird angles. And as it settled out, hardened in time, now you're telling me mud can become rock? Of course it can. And we'll get to that. So see how you see the different layers here, water, then kind of a color there. That's a very easy experiment to do. You just go grab different soil types, little pebbles and whatnot, and you put them in a jar with water, close up the jar, you shake it up, and after a minute, the heavier stuff falls on the bottom, the next lighter, and you get your little layers like that. And you see that. If you drink the latte in a clear glass, you'll see the coffee settles at the bottom, then the foam. It just basic principles there of hydrological sorting. How about wheat? What happens if you have all-purpose flour and you let it sit in a damp location for a couple decades? It becomes hard as stone. It's like petrified stone. This was a 50-pound bag of flour that was left behind in the old mill, and it got wet and humid somewhere. I don't know if it was I don't know whether it was in the south. It was somewhere there. I forgot exactly where. But anyway, it becomes hard as a rock. All right, we have a problem now with this layering that you saw, the Charles Lyell, the aging of the earth, because in many places, what do we see? What are these? Petrified tree trunks that'll cross multiple layers of strata. What trees will survive millions of years without decomposing? No, none. So how do you explain something like this? Rapid burial, and we'll get to that.
We're gonna get to a lot of stuff.
Yeah, how much time we have? Yeah, we have an hour. Okay, I'm only on slide 39. We're okay, we're fine, time-wise. All right, so what happened here? You see a fish, big fish, eating another fish, but yet it's encased. So whatever happened here happened quickly. As we're gonna get to a slide later, you can only get fossils one way. And we'll get to it. Here was an interesting one. Here's when they discovered was a mammal attacking a reptile. So some kind of rodent type creature was attacking a reptilian. And in the middle of the attack, they got encased. So something happened where fish, in the middle of eating, all of a sudden found themselves encased in mud to be preserved forever, or at least until the Lord destroys the earth with fire. Same here, a rodent-type mammalian creature was attacking a reptile, and in the middle of the attack, something happened where he stayed in that position. Something happened real quickly. All right, here's a fact. Fossils can only form during rapid encasement in moist or wet soil. And this is from a regular, from a National Park Service. So this is from a government website. Rapid burial of organisms by sediment. So we can confidently say fossils can only be formed with a rapid burial of sediments. We won't read the rest, I think it's obvious. Many places they find hundreds and hundreds of bones, like if something swept them away into a corner and they're just, all the animals were just piled in the corner. All over the place. And we see that when there's great floods, what happens with debris? You know, it just collects in some place there and
Mountain Dew bottles collect.
Mountain Dew, yeah, so we shouldn't be surprised if when there's massive amounts of water runoff taking all debris, that we would have expected to see the same thing when the flood occurred. And you remember, the flood occurred over many weeks, many weeks. All right, and the last one, 1995, paleontologist Mary Schweitzer, I believe she was a grad student at Montana State or University of Montana, one or the other. They're the two biggest dinosaur departments, paleontology. And somehow she decided to cut into the bone of a T-Rex and add this little solution into the marrow area. And she realized that, wait a second, that's Mary Schweitzer. She realized, wait a second, the tissue still has blood cells, red blood cells. The tissue still has flesh. How did that survive 60 to 70 million years without being petrified? It's only one explanation, it's not that old. And now they say that the norm is to do this, is to cut bones open, use this solution to get soft tissue out of dinosaur bones, that the exception. And many scientists have come to this realization, and guess what, paleontologists, guess what happens to their tenure at the university? It gets canceled. But they're still in it. They're still studying it, and now they're part of different organizations where they're studying and reporting this. So obviously this doesn't fit the Darwinian paradigm.
You mean
All right.
when they report that something is still living like that, they get,
No. They report that this is soft tissue. This can't be millions of years old, millions and millions, because it's soft, pliable, and they could even, in so many cases, see the red blood cells, and
So it doesn't fit what the university has.
Yeah, which tells you
established,
dinosaurs,
Darwin and
died
so
millions
that-
of years ago and whatnot. And
But
if you start questioning them on them, you can see that it falls apart. There's a lot of, it's just, you can't question. All right, so
Not just Dr. Fauci.
picture yourself being on a nice sandy beach like this. You're gonna put on your copper tone and get some vitamin D, except you, Rabbi, because you've got too much sun as a youth already.
Yep.
But you gotta be careful, because in this beach there are
Ooh, monitor.
Komodo dragons.
Oh my God.
So they're pretty powerful and very fast, good swimmers. Here's the interesting thing about the Komodo dragon. First of all, its name, what is it?
Dragon.
Dragon, okay, interesting. Number two, they found exact skeletons of Komodo dragons, except this is how big they were. They were much larger than they are today, almost 20 feet long, but it's the same bone structure. Well, what happened? Well, if you didn't know, reptiles continue growing all their life. They don't stop growing. They grow faster till a certain age, but then they slowly keep on growing. So nowadays, they don't live very long. Some of the Galapagos tortoise live, 100 plus years. They can live a long time. But then they die, right? What if they can live hundreds and hundreds of years? What are they gonna continue to do? Grow and grow and grow. So we saw this, we've seen this before. We saw the lifespan before the flood, right? Adam, 930 years, Seth, Enos, Cain, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, and Noah. And if you remember, where's the pointer? We can see who paid attention when I talked about this. What does the name Adam mean?
man,
Man. What does Seth mean?
appointed?
Appointed. What does Enos mean? Mortal. Man appointed mortal. What does Canaan mean? Actually, I forgot what Canaan means. What does Mahalalel mean? So man appointed mortal. Question, I forgot what Canaan means. Mahalalel, again, Mahalalel. It's Mahalalel means the blessed God. What does Jared mean? Coming down. Someone look up what Canaan means, please, in Hebrew. Canaan. Well, so we can get the complete thing. Or maybe I have my notes here. Is this?
No, that's
My notes never get archived, so they always lay around here. This is not it?
No, that's last.
Shoots, okay. Somebody please look up what Canaan means. You can find this on a website, or were they, okay, so Adam, man appointed mortal, question mark, I forgot what that means.
Lowland here, lowland?
No, not that. Mahalalel means the blessed God. Jared, his name means coming down.
And Cain usually means acquired. Like, when she said, I acquired man, I came.
Cain, but that's Canaan, even though it's.
Man appointed mortal.
Canaan is C-A-N-A-A.
Well, it's something, in Luke it's Kenna, but we'll get to it. It'll come back. I'm not that old. Yeah.
Something about the man acquired God.
Okay, Adam, okay, so Mahalalel means the blessed God. Jared means coming down. In the days of Jared, the watchers came down. Enoch means teaching. Methuselah means his death shall bring. It's always in context to judgment. Lamech is lamentation, despairing. Noah, what does Noah mean?
Is it like comfort?
Rest, yeah, comfort, rest. So we still don't know what Canaan is, I forgot. Adam, I can check in my notes, but we won't do it. We will, because we can't miss this one. Canaan. Let me just go back to my notes here. This was ministry, presentations. Nope. Mishkan Shofar. What sermon? This was January 31st, yeah. So, gospel before the flood. So I'll get to it in a second here.
Canaan means low, humble, or subjugated.
Acquired.
My mouse disappeared. Oh, because it's back here? That's why. Come back, come back. It's lost. Where did it go? Here it is.
I have humble in here, yeah.
Canaan.
I see the K-A, what you're talking about.
Sorry, it's just, where's this mouse? It keeps on going to the other page there. Where is it? Wow. Come on. Which one is it? There it is. Okay, I'm gonna lose it now. Give me a second here. So it's,
I have acquired in here as an act of commerce, like merchant and trader, what the Rabbi was talking about. So something that came
So
out of
Canaan.
trade.
Slide 21. We just need Canaan. You can even find, if you can look online, you can find this online. If you look at Genesis 5 gospel message, it'll tell you what it is. That might be faster than me going through here. Anyone find it yet?
Genesis 5 gospel message.
It should show you an image there.
All right, Adam means appointed,
Yeah,
Adam
thank
means
you.
man, Seth means appointed, Enosh means mortal, frail, or miserable, Canaan means sorrow or dirge.
Okay, thank you. That was it.
Mahalalel means the blessed Lord, Jared shall come down, Enoch teaching, Methuselah his death shall bring, Lamech despairing.
Great, okay, yep, so that was it. So again, so it's man appointed mortal, Canaan. What was it, Canaan again?
Canaan,
Sorrow, okay, yeah, man
sorrow or
appointed
dirge.
mortal, sorrow. The blessed God shall come down teaching.
His death
His
shall bring,
death, whose death?
his death.
Mahalalel, the blessed God. The blessed God's death shall bring the despairing rest. So, look, I cannot imagine the rabbis never noticed that when studying Torah and Genesis 5. I just can't imagine. I think they went, no, I don't want to hear about it. They just kind of glanced over it. All right, so back to this. Something happened during the flood, that they lived a long time, And then after the flood, the generation that was born within the flood lived kind of long, right? Noah, Shem, but then it starts dropping dramatically. So you would expect the life of animals to also drop dramatically. So what could have happened? Let's go back. Well, one thing's for sure, the canopy above the earth, that ice layer or some kind of moisture layer, because remember, water absorbs high energy particles from space. So when they want to, like physicists want to capture high energy particles, they'll put big cylinders of containers of water underground because it'll trap it pretty well, and that's how they study it. So you can imagine that layer of water upstairs, up above, would have stopped solar radiation and other high energy protons. And what do those do when they hit your body? You know, they mess around with your cells, move things around, your DNA. It knocks molecules out of place where you can get, it's I don't want to say deformities, but just corruption of the body, decay. The other one I'd say is, if you look at the nostrils of dinosaurs, like the big old dinosaurs, the ones that are like, those big old brontosaurus, their nostrils are no more bigger than that of a horse. So how do you get two nostrils the size of a horse and such a big, how do you get all that oxygen in the animal? Well, if you had a layer of ice around the earth, it would have created a natural bariatric chamber on Earth, which means the oxygen content would be higher, which means that people could live longer, because it's, what happens if someone burns their feet, they put them in a bariatric chamber for a day or day and a half, it heals quickly because it's forcing all that oxygen to go in there and start healing. That's what people like, I think athletes like LeBron James, Michael Phelps, and I think Kobe Bryant, they had their own bariatric chambers at home where they'd sleep in there to help them recover. That could be another reason. So something happened where now lifespans decreased. All right, so we saw the kind of animals that he could have put in the ark. How about the woolly mammoth? Here's the depiction of the woolly mammoth is that it lived in this ice age. It was hunted by the prehistoric man. Yeah, it looks pretty cold there. He's not very well covered. I don't think he's going to last very long with that kind of clothing there. What's that?
Didn't they find one in Siberia?
Yeah, and I'm going to get to that. Yeah.
Wyoming.
So, anyway, I kind of want to just talk about this because it's actually pretty interesting. All right, some things we do know. We do know that there used to be glaciers that came all the way down as far south as I think lower Wisconsin. I'm not sure what the state is, Illinois. Obviously Minnesota, they call Minnesota the land of 10,000 lakes. What evidence do we have that there were glaciers there? Well, there's a few things. Notice this here. This is kind of what, if there were glaciers in the continental US and maybe up in Siberia, I don't know. But this is what would have happened. That means the land would have extended further out. So what you see here is land. This is a continental shelf. That means humans could have gone out here walking hundreds of miles off the coast of Ocean City to the edge of the continental shelf. So this here would have been exposed land. This is what it's like today. This is what it would have been like back then.
Until the glaciers melted.
Until the glaciers melted. Yeah, so California as well, it goes out there, and then you go out there, and then there's the continental shelf that drops off. Which explains one way how animals could have gone from where they originated in Turkey, where the ark landed, all the way to the continents here, to Australia. They were just able to walk all the way down because all that would have been connected as one big land bridge, if this was the case. But we do know that there were glaciers. Now the question is, what formed these glaciers? Again, Minnesota, a lot of evidence, they call them kettle lakes. All those lakes are kettle lakes. As glaciers push out, they push out rock. And they see plenty of evidence of that. I think I may I might get to it. So kind of look at, since I'm from California, let's look at California. So I used to go to school off of here, Ventura, Nacapa, somewhere up here. And there were these Channel Islands. Somewhat deep to get there. It's like an hour and a half boat ride, ferry ride to those islands. You have to do it by permission. It's a national park. But the question is, this is what it looks like when you look at the terrain. So you can imagine from the previous picture that I showed you, a lot of this would have been they could have walkable until you get to the continental shelf. If the glaciers were still around and all that water was locked in the glaciers. So how did animals get to all these islands? They probably just migrated there. The bigger ones eventually died out as the glacier started melting, the waters rose. There's only limited amount of land here, so big animals like deer or maybe buffalo, they should have found bones there. I didn't really look into that. But you do have animals today in those islands. Foxes, skunks. Apparently there were pygmy mammoths there, so they had to get there somehow. Mice, night lizards. Well, obviously we know bats can fly, but the other ones can't. Lizards, alligator lizards, salamanders, frogs, snakes. So how could have they gone there? I think they got there during that period where the glaciers had, made it accessible by land to those islands. All right, so talking about mammoths. This one's an interesting one here. This is the Berenkov mammoth. Let me find it and read you about it. So they did a lot of these mammoths they find in Siberia, northern part of Siberia, northern Alaska, which is very interesting because you're wondering, why this animal way out there? Okay, so this one is, and there's been many expeditions. This one's the Berenkov mammoth. Let me find it. Here we go. It's called the Berenkov mammoth. So in May 1846, a surveyor named Beckendorf and his party camped along Siberia's Indigirka River. The spring thaw and unusually heavy rains caused the swollen river to erode a new channel. Beckendorf noticed a large object bobbing slowly in the water. As the black, horrible, giant-like mass was thrust out of the water, they beheld a colossus elephant's head, armed with mighty tusks, with long trunk moving in an unearthly manner, as though seeking something lost therein. They tried to pull the mammoth to shore with ropes and chains, but soon realized that its hind legs were still frozen in the river bottom in a standing position. 24 hours later, the river bottom thawed and eroded, freeing the mammoth. A team of 50 men and their horses pulled the mammoth onto dry land, 12 feet from shore. The 13-foot tall, 15-foot long beast was fat and perfectly preserved. Its widely open eyes gave the animal an appearance of life, as though it might move in a moment and destroy them with a roar. They removed the tusk and opened its full stomach, containing young shoots of the fir and pine, and a quantity of young fir cones, also in a chewed state. Hours later, and without warning, the river bank collapsed because the river had slowly undercut the bank. The mammoth was carried off towards the Arctic Ocean, never to be seen again. And this is one of many stories. Another case in 1901, they found one. Okay, so the natives of Siberia knew about them. They thought they were giant gophers that lived underground because they looked so real. They were afraid to look at them. They thought it was bad luck. So they would just run away, because with their open eyes, beneath the eyes, they looked alive to them. So they thought it was bad luck to study them, to get up close to them. And there's hundreds and hundreds of mammoths they found frozen, and they found thousands and thousands of tusks of woolly mammoth tusks. Now the woolly mammoth tusk is very different than the elephant tusk, African elephant. They have pointed tusks, so they can dig into the ground for salt or mud pits. These don't. Their tusks are curved, so they're really not meant for digging into the ground. Also, along with woolly mammoths, they find woolly rhinoceros, antelopes, yaks, bisons, foxes, just other types of animals. So the question is, elephants need a huge quantity of water to drink and quantities of food. So the African elephant, they say, will eat up to 16 hours a day, will be foraging for food. And it'll drink, I think, somewhere between 30 to, I forgot, a little more gallons of water a day. How could a woolly mammoth in the snow drink that much water, find that much food? So, also, what is it? Oil well drillers, you know, they always have to go get a core sample when they're going down for oil, and they have to bring it up and look at it. They're telling you, we can go through like 1,000 feet of frozen permafrost, and then we get to this lush layer there. And what will come up is, in times they've come up where core samples, as they're digging down, it'll be like a palm tree, the core of a palm tree, and beneath that it'll be core of some other type of tree and some other kind of bushes. Almost like whatever happened, they all fell on top of each other. So when they're going through the drill, in one case, it was reported that they cored right through the middle of a standing tree, and the core of that tree was 300 feet high. So what are these people drilling way up in the northern Alaska? So when they're drilling, they're drilling for oil at the very northern edge and further up from the continent, from the coast of Alaska. So why all that lush frozen vegetation below? And the question is, what happened? What happened to the woolly mammoths? This one's a famous mammoth here. This is called talk a little bit about him. He's the Berezovka mammal. Eventually ended up in the museum. This is when they first discovered. So its head had been eaten by local animals, because this is what they ate, the foxes and the wolves, because again, they had a dinner. They found one in 1901, and they served it. They served the meat because it was still pink and fresh. And they had a mammoth course, and their reaction to the food, to the serving of it was no tougher than the local sirloin sold to us at the local butcher shop. But that, imagine, thousands of years old, and yet it's that fresh. So something happened
Where
where
do they eat it? Where do they?
this was in St. Petersburg.
Oh.
It wasn't this one, but it was another one. So
Russians are
again,
using
something flash froze woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceros. Now let's talk about the wool on them. The wool is not the kind of wool to keep them warm. You need fur to keep warm. They don't have little muscles which creates the air pocket. The wool, their hair is not oily. Like yak and bison and caribou, they have oily hair, and they have this special muscle that can like push their hair out to create air pockets in there. Not the woolly mammoths. Their woolly hair has a lot of air gaps in it. So there's no way they survived. They lived in a frozen or tundra and a snow environment. They lived in the lush paradise apparently, and they believe there were millions and millions of them from what they found. They found, I think they talk about hundreds of thousands of tusks on the seashore, but they're tusks that they can't sell to the market because by that point it's dry and brittle. So what they like is getting the frozen tusks, because then that's a tusk that's fresh and they can carve it and sell it. So there was a big market, I think, from 1850 to the early 1900s of mammoth tusks. All right, so about this mammoth. So a couple interesting things when it was found. Okay, so again, its head had been eaten by the local wolves and whatnot, because again, it's free food and well preserved. Here's a picture of it. Couple interesting things. One thing they find about these mammoths is that it looks like they died of asphyxiation. It's when they look at their capillaries, it shows all the signs that they died of asphyxiation. In this case, they noticed that one of its hind legs, and a lot of them are found in the standing position, its hind leg had been crushed, broken vertically. So there was some kind of pressure on the leg pushing down that snapped it. One effect when animals are gasping for air is in males, they get erect. So he died of asphyxiation. Something was putting weight on him where he was dying of asphyxiation. He had an erection and his weight flattened his penis. So again, I'm trying to picture whatever happened while it was standing, still alive. Doesn't look like it was trying to run away, or maybe got stuck in the snow or whatever it was, and they just kept on pushing the weight on top of him where it crushed him. And they find a lot of woolly mammoths in those positions, like standing. In many cases, they found them with fresh food in its mouth, fresh seed pods in its mouth, and its stomach, freshly undigested greenery. in a couple hours, stomach acids is gonna destroy that. So there was a flash freezing that went on. Something happened where a huge, animal like this, many tons, was frozen within a few hours. Many theories, we don't know what it is, but we do know that. A lot of these are found in this area up here, Siberia, northern Siberia. This area as well. This area is very cold, right? There's no way herd of animals like elephants, woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceros could have ever survived there. There's not enough food for one thing. All right, another thing they're found in what are called yedomas. Very interesting name, yedomas. You see, so this is just kind of a part of in Siberia where there was, I guess, erosion, but you see a lot of fertile ground underneath. They call it yedomas. It's like muck. So most of these woolly mammoths seem to be found in these frozen yedomas, which is like this very carbon-rich material. What does it look like? It looks like this. Mind you, this is frozen, but this is very carbon-rich, and this is where they find a lot of these animals together.
Is it sort of like the peat bogs?
Yeah, they call it muck. It's what we would call muck. Yeah, and that's so muck. It's only found in the furthest northern latitudes. In one case, they found these group of oxen trying to cross this river, totally frozen. So whatever happened, it flash froze them in place while they were swimming. Another case, so this is, how about northern Alaska? So this is where they do all the oil drilling, and this is where they're finding a lot of this rich soil, thousands of feet beneath the permafrost. About 1,400 feet, they'll reach the layer where they come across these core samples with a lot of vegetation. So I guess the question we need to ask ourselves, what happened where at least 1,000, 1,500 foot of soil covered what would have been this lush paradise? I guess what I'm trying to get at is that Noah's event, flood, was not just rain and this, it was, I don't think the word catastrophic would even cover the kind of upheaval that occurred during that 1 year period. I'm not sure how long, it says how long it rained for, but it was enough where, again, that's the evidence we have today. So we got to draw some kind of conclusion. I guess the conclusion is that it was terrible. What formed the glaciers? Again, if you follow the Bible, the earth is only about 6,500 years old. So it's not like it was snow over time. This glacier, something caused the glaciers to form, and also for snow to form in the north and south poles. Now, we have the magnetic field, so I think it's like highly frozen crystallized ice can become magnetic, so it could be drawn to the poles. Something happened. Some kind of liquid went up and came down. Whether there was a comet that crashed or water came up from the earth to the stratosphere. Right up in the stratosphere, we're in the minus 100 and something degrees Fahrenheit temperature, it's freezing. So you can imagine that it had become super cool and came down, but something happened within Noah's flood to cause the ice to form there. And again, we don't know, we're not there, but I personally think it's from the ground. Water shot up in the stratosphere and came back down towards the poles to create these glaciers we have. What else? So how catastrophic was the flood event? Well, we know that no land animal that breathes through its nostrils survived. We know that the arc dimensions are the best seaworthy ratios for stability and to carry heavy loads. Now, the Naval Academy and I think the Korean Naval Academy have done studies, and they saw that the ratios of Noah's Ark fit perfect for stability, for carrying heavy loads and stabilities in heavy seas. Large drogue stones may have been used to keep the bow of the ark pointed in waves. They use that today. People who sail across the oceans and are experienced sailors and 30 or 40 foot sailboats, they make their own drogue anchors. They'll take like a tire, a car tire or two, and they'll wrap it with rope, and then so it stays, and they'll throw it off the back of the sailboat in heavy seas. And what it does, it kind of keeps the boat from crashing into the trough of the waves if you do it right. Now, drogestones look like, you'll see what they look like. The water covering the earth. Oh, here's another thing. So all this geological upheaval, the mountains we see, the valleys, that's a lot of, think about how much energy was released with the tsunami in 2004 there in Phuket. That's nothing compared to what probably happened here. So what does water do? Water is a great vehicle for dispersing the energy. And you would have seen them in waves. I think there were some mighty waves in that ocean. The Earth's landscape atmosphere were dramatically changed by the time the waters receded. All right, so this is quoted twice, 3 times in the Bible, twice in the Old Testament, and once in the New Testament. Again, take it for what it is, Apocrypha, but the book of Jasher, chapter 6. Here it says, and the waters prevailed, and they greatly increased upon the earth, and they lifted up the ark, and it was raised from the earth. And the ark floated upon the face of the waters, and it was tossed upon the waters, so that all the living creatures within were turned about like pottage in a cauldron. And great anxiety seized all the living creatures that were in the ark, and the ark was like to be broken. And all the living creatures that were in the ark were terrified, and the lions roared, and the oxen lowed, and the wolves howled. And every living creature in the ark spoke and lamented in its own language, so that their voices reached to a great distance. And Noah and his sons cried and wept in their troubles. They were greatly afraid that they had reached the gates of death. And Noah prayed unto the Lord and cried unto him on account of this. And he said, O Lord, help us, for we have no strength to bear this evil that has encompassed us. For the waves of the waters have surrounded us. Mischievous torrents have terrified us. The snares of death have come before us. Answer us, O Lord. Answer us. Lighten up thy countenance towards us, and be gracious to us. Redeem us and deliver us. And the Lord hearkened to the voice of Noah, and the Lord remembered him. And the wind passed over the water, and the waters were still, and the ark rested. And the fountains of the deep and the windows of heaven were stopped, and the rain from heaven were restrained. What does this kind of sound like from the New Testament? Where do we see something similar to this?
When the disciples were afraid.
Yeah, where? When they're crossing the Sea of Galilee. That's what came to mind to me. All right, so if that's true, which I can imagine, the waves must have been ginormous. You know, if valleys are forming, mountains are, all that water's got to be displaced, and all that energy's got to go somewhere. So I think it was going to be huge waves. Drogestones, as we're going to see later, will have helped point the boat at least in the direction of the waves, so that the waves would not hit it sideways, but from the bow or the stern and bow. Psalms 104:5-8, and he set the earth on its foundations, Genesis 1, so that it should never be moved. You covered it with a deep as with a garment. The water stood above the mountains. At your rebuke they fled. At the sound of your thunder they took flight. The mountains rose. The valleys sank down to a place that you appointed them. I believe this. I don't think this is in creation. The fact that the mountains rose and the valleys sank down, I believe this was part of the flood event. Huge waves. So again, if you have a drogestones on the side, you'll see what it's like. It's going to keep the ship pointed into these waves. This is a massive storm off the coast, Pacific coast, and the chemical tanker ship. You can see there's some mighty large waves. So these ships that carry cargo, their dimensions, the ratios are very much what Noah's Ark dimensions are, which is what they've, again, as I told you, they've studied this in Naval Academy, the Koreans, that Noah's Ark's dimensions are perfect for.
How close is the replica that they did to build?
Well, it's 500 feet, so I don't know how big, I'm sure the one that the Creation Museum is about 500 feet.
Okay.
All right, so is there any evidence outside the Bible that there was a flood event? Well, we have Flavius Josephus. He writes, it is said that there is still some part of this ship, talking about the ark, in Armenia. Again, remember, the mountains of Ararat go into Armenia, at the mountain of the Chaldeans, and that some people carry out pieces of bitumen, which they take away and use chiefly as amulets for the averting of mischief. So that's just, to ward off evil spirits. Bitumen. What is bitumen? Yeah, pitch, right? Pitch. So
Where they cover the wood in?
yeah, So, and what did he say? They didn't just, usually they cover the outside of the boats, but God told them to do what? The inside and the outside, yeah. Here's another one from Josephus. There's a great mountain in Armenia over Minas called Baris, upon which it is reported that many who fled at the time of the deluge were saved, and that the one who was carried in an ark came on shore upon the top of it, and that the remains of the timber were a great while preserved. So remember, if you're covering the pitch on both sides, that's also going to act as a good agent for preserving the timber. This might be the man about whom Moses, a legislator of the Jews, wrote. All right, so this is Mount Ararat. Again, he didn't say it's going to land in Mount Ararat. He said in the mountains of Ararat. So there's a mountain chain there. That's in Turkey. There's two of them. I think the one on the left is Ararat the Greater, and the one on the right's Ararat the Lesser. Very fertile valley below. And they found these things here in the valley there, these huge stones with carvings on top as a rope went through them. Drogue stones. Again, drogue stones, you put them out the side of the ship, and it keeps the ship from tipping, and it always keeps it pointed at waves, incoming waves. There's about, I think, 9 of them they found there, really big ones. Again, you got to ask your question, what are these things doing there? Who bore those things there in the middle? Questions about this is kind of what it may have looked like. All right, so I think it was in 1949, a Turkish commander was flying over, and he took a picture of this weird thing. This was 49, but they didn't and it was a part of a mud flow in the ancient, what they called an ancient mud flow. Many have said, oh no, this is what happens when mud flows around a big stone, and then it forms this. Well, it's true. The only problem is it's pointed on both sides. When there's a big stone there, it creates a big loopy, like you see in river currents when water goes around a stone. Here, the point is pretty clear. Now remember, when the ship decomposes, it breaks from the inside out, right? It doesn't cave in. Well, they measured this thing. It happens to be exactly about 500 feet. They found rivets around there. The rivets were made of a combination of iron, aluminum, and titanium. Now, what does that tell you about the pre-flood metallurgy? What is it, metallurgical work? Do we see any of that? We do. Go to Genesis 4. You see one of them was dealing with metallurgy. One of Adam's offspring. You can check it on Genesis 4. So yeah, they had knowledge of metallurgy. So this again, aluminum and iron and titanium. Titanium that's not easy to get. So this is what some older ships look like that they found. Just kind of notice the similarities there. This is obviously a much smaller one, but you kind of see a little bit of, this is not as old. Here's another one, this deep sea ocean. Found a few little similarities there. Again, remember, Noah's Ark would be thousands of years older than these here. All right, so Ron Wyatt went there in 1980 and took pictures, and they started, they found petrified poop, and he's got a museum. But anyway, even the Turkish government came and said, look, this is real, and they made it an official site. They call it Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark National Park Visitor Center. They call it Nuhum Gemnezi, which I think is Noah's big boat, Noah's Ark. That's the name in their language.
Nahum?
Huh?
Nahum in the Bible?
Nahum.
Nahum, sorry, it
Nahum.
means comfort. It means the same thing as Noah. It's like,
Okay.
yeah.
Remember this name, Noom, okay? Just remember, because we're going to see it somewhere else, which is kind of blows my mind. So that's why I put that there. Hundreds of flood legends remain today. Some estimate over 660 worldwide flood legends. So God told Noah's descendants to scatter, repopulate the world. Did they listen to God's command? Did they do that?
Yeah.
No, they didn't. They went Come on, do we ever listen to God? Come on, we're rebellious.
Tower of Babel.
Yeah, eventually, yeah, so yeah, they gathered in the plains of Shinar, built themselves a Tower of Babel to make a name for themselves. Was God pleased with this? So he confused them, changed their language, and they were scattered. So back then, we would have had the glaciers, and they could have crossed the Bering Land Sea from Asia to Alaska, and they could have, animals could have chased the kangaroos down the coast from Malaysia, down all the way into Australia. And as the glaciers melted, the waters rose, they became landlocked there. So there's explanations for a lot of these things. So this, we got all these different people groups, almost represented here at Mishkan. I don't think we have Aborigines. So we need someone with Aborigine descent, and then we can say we got them all. Some similarities, I pick up Gilgamesh. Take all the seed of all creatures aboard the ship, what the Bible says. I boarded the ship and closed the door. So what's interesting, in Genesis 7, he says, come into the ark. It'd be interesting to see what the word is in Hebrew. Because if God told him, come into the ark, where does that tell you the Lord is? Come into the ark. He didn't say go into the ark.
Yeah.
Where would he
It's in
be?
the ark.
It'd be good to check the Hebrew word for that. I sent out a dove, the dove went, then came back, no resting place, then Bible, he sent out a dove. So you see a lot of similarities there, right? All right, how about the Hawaiian flood legend? Long after the death of Queen Juana, the first man of the world became wicked and terrible for people to live. There was one good man left, his name was what? Remember the previous slide? Do you see the similarity in names? No. He made a great canoe with a house on it, filling it with animals, and when the waters came up over all the earth, all the people and animals in it were killed. Only Nu'u and his family were saved. Gosh, that sounds so much like the flood. We saw that one. How about the Hiking Classic from China? The ancient Chinese classic called Hiking tells the story of Fuhai, whom the Chinese considered to be the father of their civilization. So what Fuhai did is he went and he drained all the swamps and all the serpents and dragons from the swamps to create villages there. All right, anyway, his history records that Fuhai, his wife, 3 sons, and 3 daughters escaped the great flood. And his family were the only people alive on earth. I'm sorry, I take that back. Fuhai is Noah. There's somebody else who's the founder of China. After the great flood, they repopulated the world. An ancient temple in China has a wall painting that shows Fuhai's boat in the raging waters. Dolphins are swimming around it, and a dove with an olive branch and beak is flying towards it. Now, some say that's a fake, so I'd have to go see it for myself.
So you wanted to know what the word was in
Hebrew.
Genesis 7:1?
Yeah.
Like every Saturday night when we say we call for Eliyahu.
Yeah, bo.
Bo, Eliyahu, and the word here is bo.
Which means what?
Come. It's odd they have it translated in the Hebrew go, but it means come. Go.
Okay, so I personally would say like the Lord's in the boat and saying, come into the ark. That's how I would interpret
Then he
it.
said Yahweh to Noah, bo, which
Come.
they have go, but I think it means come.
Come, yeah, okay.
You and all of you,
Yeah.
house of you, into the ark.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll only know once we get there. All right, how about the Toltec Indians? This is a good one. Found in the histories of the Toltec Indians of ancient Mexico, the story of the first world that lasted 1,700 years and was destroyed by a great flood that covered even the highest mountains. The story tells of a man and his family who escaped destruction in a Topolteptiloculi, whatever, which means a closed chest. The name of a man was Cox. Following the great flood, these men began to multiply and build a very mighty Sikwal, or great tower, to provide a safe place if the world were destroyed again. However, the languages became confused, so different language groups wandered to other parts of the world. The Toltecs claimed they started as a family of 7 friends and their wives who spoke the same language. They crossed great waters, lived in caves, and wandered 104 years until they came to Huahua, South Mexico. The story reports this happened 520 years after the Great Flood. Now, the Bible dates put the flood at 656 years after creation. The Toltec legend is only 60 years off, even after 4,000 years, using today's time frame. How about locally here? How about local Indians here in native Indians? How about the Chickasaw Nation? Again, this is not taken from any creation or biblical web. This is from their webpage. Long ago, perhaps in the days when our Chickasaw ancestors still resided in the land of the setting sun, the Great Spirit, Abba Bini, sent rain. Soon water covered all the earth. Some Chickasaws made rafts to save themselves, and creatures like large white beavers cut the thongs that bound the rafts, all drowned except one family, and the pair of each of all animals. When the rain stopped, the flood began receding. A raven appeared with part of an ear of corn. Abba, what do you think Abba means? Yeah, imagine even in the Indian language, that's what that means. Told the Chickasaws to plant it. Abba Binil also told them that eventually the earth would be destroyed by fire. Rabbi, how's the earth going to be destroyed in Revelation?
Fire.
By fire. Its ruined passage by a rain of flood and oil. All right. There's more. The Cochiti Pueblo of New Mexico told that a great boat was built and they began to load it with much corn and they took all it. You get the
All
idea.
of them, yeah.
Almost all American Indian legends have some kind of flood legend. Again, is it coincidental? No, I think it's because there was an actual flood legend. All right, so we have 12 minutes. So if there was a flood, we should see evidence of this. So what we have today, we can interpret in one of two ways. It took hundreds of millions of years to occur. It happened very rapidly and catastrophically. The Bible lays out the years from creation until now, the time of the New Testament. Turns out to be 4,000 plus 2,022 years, so about 6,000 years, not billions of years old. All right, so when clams or mussels die, how do they end up?
They stick their tongue out.
Yeah, they stick their tongue out. They have little X's in their eyes. So if you like seafood and you buy mussels and they're open and you tap on them and they don't close, you don't want to cook them that way because that's a good way of visiting the ER and losing about 15 pounds. Or you might die. So why is it that towards the top of Mount Everest they find clams in their closed state?
Because it was covered with water at one point.
But you've heard that expression, he clammed up like a shell. Clams close up when they're scared. So why are all clams and mussels found in the closed position?
Because they had a clam bake.
Yeah, something happened terrible that scared the heck out of them where they all closed up and stayed on that. But again, pretty sure the world is not more than 6,000, 6,500 years old. So Mount Everest didn't just slowly form over eons of years. If they're finding these clams towards almost the top of Mount Everest, it's because that part of the land was thrust up very quickly. All right, how long do you think it took to form this canyon?
Couple hours.
Oh, come on, you're stealing my thunder, Alex. All right, so this is Mount St. Helens before it blew up. I think in May 15th, 1980, it blew up. Boom. The northwest flank just got, destroyed. It was, why am I showing this picture? Because this was in China, so they built an earthen dam and they wanted to study how water kind of erodes when it goes over the top, an earthen dam. So they just did a study. I believe they did this in China. So what happened is when the northwest flank blew up, you see this here, it's called the Toutle River. It's actually a creek, it's not very big. So the land just flowed over this creek and it started backing up. After 2 days, it crested the top of that massive landslide. And they think within an hour it created this canyon where the walls are about 150 feet high.
Okay, are you showing China or are you
No,
showing
this
North
is Mount St.
America?
Helens.
That's Mount St. Helens.
So this is the northwest flank that just blew up and threw all this debris and rock and ice over cover. But eventually, again, this creek, again, it's not a river, so it's not a whole lot of water, started backing up and it went over the top. As soon as it goes over the top, it carved out this valley. And notice what's interesting here is this was from the land that fell, from the massive land that fell from when it blew up. Notice, what do you notice here? Layers. Layering. Very much like we see in the Grand Canyon. So how did the Grand Canyon form? Well, we got a couple problems with the Grand Canyon with the current theory that it eroded, cut into the canyon. They believe that Grand Canyon was part of a big lake back here. This went all the way up to Salt Lake City, so it covered a couple states. Here is the Grand Canyon today. Here's the Kaibab Plateau. So what's a plateau?
A level area.
So we see it here, let's see, so that picture there is right here, we're somewhere up there, Arizona. I'm interjecting that photo over here so you can get the idea the Grand Canyon would have been somewhere up there. So I think what happened was as the waters were receding, of course, water would have stayed in certain places and worked its way out of here. It overflowed that area there. By the way, California used to be a lake, and we'll get to that one in the end. So here's what I believe happened. So here's the Kaibab Plateau. Here's the lake that I was showing you before. As it filled up, it went over this. And once water goes over something, that's it. You can't stop it. And that's the Grand Canyon. That goes out towards the sea. This is what a plateau looks like. So water may have backed up there and slowly, gone over this. And once, like I said, goes over, it starts cutting through. It'll cut through rock, whatever it is, it'll cut through. So in a couple of weeks, it carved out the Grand Canyon. And you see this little side sheet on the Grand Canyon? You see the Colorado River down there? You see this here? You see the same feature where that event occurred in Mount St. Helens back in 1980. So the main creek is over there. You see this little side thing just like you do on the Grand Canyon. So that was almost like a little mini Grand Canyon event that occurred right before our eyes. All right, so interesting thing is they believe that the Great Canyon, Valles Marineris, and Mars, how do you think they believe it formed? They believe that water formed it. And very quickly. This is what the scientists believe. They believe that this canyon here, it's almost as big as the United States, was formed by water. But yet, and very quickly, but yet the Grand Canyon, they refuse to say that it was formed quickly by water, that it was done over millions and millions of years of water slowly eroding away the canyon. I find that very interesting.
Isn't that how
So-
water works?
So this is, again, this is from Mars picture, and they believe this was done by water. They said this valley was formed by water. All right, California. Why California? Because I came from California. And I believe at one point this was a lake, and I know that because I took a class in environmental studies, and they talked about the California landscape prior to settlement. The valley was very, a lot of swamps, a lot of marshes. It was very wet, and it's very lush, right? There's a lot of crops that are grown up and down. Again, always lake bottoms have very rich soil, right? The sediment settles there. So what happened? If it was a lake at some point, it had to breach the dam somewhere to leak out into the ocean and drain it. So I grew up in this area here, and I said, it's gotta be this, because this is the only place where water escapes, right here. The Carquinez Strait. And I believe it breached its dam and the flattest area here, the most square, I believe would have been right here. And then this possibly could have been a breached dam as well here, this Golden Gate area. But regardless, it breached the dam opening, and it drained all the water from the Valley of California down through there. Now, why do I say that? Because it would have happened right here. Now you think, Paul, this is very shallow. Water would have just usually when they're constructing land or settling, they take soil from the hill and they push it down from the upper section. So all of this was landfill that was pushed from the hills up here to make this. So if we go back 200 years, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't see any of this here. A lot of this here, you'd see much taller hills here. So I believe this is probably where it breached the dam, right over here. So there was higher levels here, and water backing up here, all the way back into the California Valley. And it just went over eventually, spilled its way out, and drained California. And actually, I found this in an article where they called it in the Pleistocene era, there used to be a lake there. So even they admit that there was a lake. But I believe this lake was left over from the flood. All right, 3 minutes, we'll go quickly. Niagara Falls, how do falls form? The reason you see the curved edge in there is because water always flows the fastest in the middle, so it's going to erode it there quickly. Now what's interesting, old pictures from explorers, from Dutch explorers, I believe, of the area, show that the Grand Canyon the Niagara Falls was flat, which tells you that it's not that old. That only recently, in the last hundreds of years, it started to do this, and they divert water from here. They actually divert water to create electricity, so there's actually less water running down, but you still see this curved arch here. So that's this is in western Washington State. From down here, doesn't look like much if you're boating, but when you go up high, what happened when all the water was running off from the plains? It created these little, right here, it ran off like waterfalls. These are much bigger than Niagara Falls. Niagara Falls would just be a little afterthought here. This is huge. So we have evidence that a lot of water, had to be a lot of water ran off here as well. So we have more, so the evidence is all around. This is from way higher up. This is Kiefer Falls in Miss Joyce's home country, French Guiana or British Guiana. Notice how this goes all the way out here. It does this because at some point there had to have been water coming down here as well. Now it's just there. So I think that's another remnant of the flood. That we don't see it anymore. Once it was done, now this is just what we see left. But that water had to have come all the way down there. All right, here's the Sahara Desert. Now, why am I showing the Sahara Desert? We got 1 minute, but we'll make it. I don't think a lot of us have any concept of how big the Sahara Desert is. It's only until we put the United States, continental United States, mapped over it, do we get an idea of how big the desert is. What does this look like to you? Remember, what we're looking at here is covering multiple states in length.
That's the Euphrates or the.
Oh, this is the Nile here, but what do these look like? These lines here that go in that direction.
Yeah, like they were streams of water.
Exactly, that's what you see that there. So I think this was as the waters receded from the flood, it got lower and lower, got channels, and this is what we see here. And again, this is huge. Again, the United States fits right in there. So we're basically talking from Georgia all the way up to Maine up here. So this is, this is huge. The huge features, I think, of what we see of water running off into the ocean. By the way, what do they find in the Sahara Desert? They have whale bones. They find them there. All right, we saw that. Interesting structure here, the Ricard structure. It's huge. Up close, you can't tell, but from space, you can see the runoff there, right? This is water running off. This is not wind. Again, this is huge. Multiple Western states would fit in here, in this area. This is the Ricard structure, very interesting structure. All right, these ripples. So you've probably seen these ripples when you go to the beach. It's what happens when water kind of moves in, ebbs in and out, it creates these ripples. See them there, see it there. But this is Camas Valley Prairie in, I think, Idaho or Oregon, I forget where it is. You see them there as well. And here's other more evidence of water, usually when water kind of moves back and forth a little bit, it creates these ripples. And from way up higher and a couple thousand feet up, it's more pronounced. When you're down on the ground, you can't tell because these are actually pretty tall. They're the size of a 5-story building. They're a couple hundred feet across in length, and in some places a lot more. So here's interesting, Camas Prairie ripples. Even the National Park Service will tell you that these ripples were formed by a giant lake. So they're even admitting that this was formed by they're not going to say it was part of the flood, they're going to call it a lake, but if you read the article, they're saying it was a giant lake that eventually drained and it created this ripples here. Because they got to explain it, because anyone who studies this will say these are ripples from water. So you got to give it an explanation. Their explanation, of course, is not going to be Noah's flood, but it's going to be just a giant leftover lake that eventually flooded from the Ice Age. All right, tumblers. I don't know if anyone played with tumblers before. You put in a rock, and after many weeks with grit, you get these nice round things. The only way you can get nice round polished rocks like this is when they tumble over and over and over. So why did I put that in there? all these river stones you buy from from your local quarries or garden centers had to have tumbled. Delaware River stone is from the Delaware Valley here, or the basin, the bay. How did that water barely moves. It's like a slow moving river. It's a bay. How do you get these stones there? What I believe is that these aren't just left over from the flood. As waters receded from the Appalachians mountains, it drew with it stones tumbling down and down and down, which is what we get there. We get these polished stones. 2 more minutes. This is where I work, here in Siouxland, Maryland, National Washington Cemetery. This is like 70 feet above, I think, the Branch Avenue or something. Yet, what's on top of a hill, how come I'm finding these nice big polished stones, which I brought to my house? What are these nice big large, this is a big stone, this is a big one. It's 60 pounds. What's it doing?
He did not.
What's it doing in the cemetery? Now, I see the reason I go there, I used to take my dog there to run around when I take her to work. And whenever they dig graves, they'd have to put that soil somewhere. So there was a section where they put all the soil, and that's where I would take her. But then I'd find these beautiful big granite, not granite, but I forgot what it's called, those kind of stones. So God explained this. How did these get up here on top of a hill? Again, I believe it's left over from the flood. As water receded, stones came from the Appalachian Mountains, rolling, and eventually they settled out in all these areas. And you can find these in your yard. If you ever see little polished stones like that, the only way they became circular and somewhat semi-polished is because they had to have tumbled for a long time and settled there. So I think that's another local evidence of the flood. You find the same thing in the Atacama Desert and in Chile, where it almost never rains. All right, 2 Peter 3:3-6, it says, there shall come in the last days scoffers, saying that all things continue as they were from the beginning. That's what scientists call uniformitarianism today. For they are willingly ignorant that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the world that was then being overflowed with water perished. So you can interpret this part, for they are willingly ignorant. They are dumb on purpose. Why are they dumb on purpose? Because they want to continue living in their sin and reject the Messiah as their Savior. So I think as the weeks went on, animals were dying, but humans were finding higher places to go to try to survive. And they got to a point where there was maybe 1 or 2 high places left where they were fighting for their life. I suspect after a couple of weeks of rain and cold, they had pneumonia. They were sick, and they saw the ark move away, and it was too late. They all drowned. Questions? Sorry, I went 5 minutes over. No questions? All right, Rabbi. What's the sermon this week?
Well, thank you, Paul. That was interesting. So, we still have dinosaurs. I'm going to talk about that a little bit tomorrow, Saturday anyway. The sermon is...
Not a dinosaur.
I do have a dinosaur. The sermon is the 6 Abodes of Satan, Part 2. Hey, we got a new candle. And, so I guess a lot of you heard that on Sunday we were taken hostage in our home because the guy who tried to kill her got out of jail, and he was back in his parents' house. You can tell which house it is because all the windows are blown out and the garage is torn off as the police raided the place and went in there and finally got him and took him back to jail. Fortunately, nobody else was hurt, but he apparently, from what the news said, he stabbed a minor, which had to be his brother. So he's being held on counts of assault with a deadly weapon, stabbing, and resisting arrest and all kinds of stuff. Hopefully he won't get out again. Anyway, marriage group got canceled because no one could get here except for Giovanna and Alex, and
Hey, why y'all didn't make it?
because they got here early to smoke stuff
And they had to
cook
stay
stuff.
here because they couldn't
And they
get
couldn't
out.
leave until 10 o'clock, so they almost spent the night. But yeah, we had fun Sunday. That was a lot of fun. So we'll just do that lesson next month. It's fine. It's a good lesson. I'll just hold on to it to next month. Make sure you sign up for Experiencing God. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We have 12 people signed up so far. But we need to, if you haven't taken the class yet, make sure you get there. Also, make sure you sign up for Passover. I promise you it'll sell out. If you don't sign up, you cannot come Saturday, April 4th. Saturday, April 4th is a full Passover Seder, 3.5-hour service with a meal and everything else. And it's you have to be in your seat by 6 p.m. So no later. We'd like you to get here about no later than 10 minutes up to get your seat, okay? So sign up. It's $10 to come. It will sell out. So make sure you sign up. I say this every year, early, and then people don't sign up and they're like, we didn't want to come. I'm sorry. So anyway, anything else, baby? You sure? She's exhausted. She's been working. We have my car's outside because we have so much stuff in the garages, plural, that are being shipped to Africa. We can't even get my car in there right now. So, yay. All right. So unless anyone has any questions, comments, concerns, complaints,
What's the next Tuesday teaching series, Rabbi?
it's about the empathy of sin. So we'll be talking about the empathy of sin. Okay.
Sin of empathy.
The sin of empathy, yes. Yeah, it's okay to have empathy, but it's not okay to sin in your empathy. And you'll see a lot of that going on in the world right now, especially through the churches. The churches are full of the sin of empathy because they don't interpret or process the Word of God properly, and that's something we can't. We have to take the Word of God properly. All right. Okay. Let's pray. Alvina Mokenu, we thank you so much for this time together. We thank you so much for those who are dedicated, Lord, to come out and to serve you in person. We thank you so much for those who are supporting this congregation prayerfully, financially, and socially. And Father, we ask that you would continue to grow us. You'd bring whom you'd bring here, Lord. And Father, that they would be a good fit here. We thank you for those who have come. We thank you for those who are still coming. And we thank you, Lord, for all the blessings you give us on a daily basis. We thank you for the food ministry, the medical ministry, the speaking ministry, the congregation. And we thank you, Lord, for how we can serve you in this world as we await your soon and very soon coming. So, Father, in the precious name of Yeshua, bless those that are here and send us out 2 by 2, Father, to witness the Bible to the world. In the precious name of Yeshua, amen.
Yeah.
Yay. All right, you can turn that off.
Or even Alex.
Get more food, get more dessert. I didn't like that dessert. I'm not making it again. If I do, I'm going to make it with a different crust. I don't like the graham cracker crust.
I'm trying to figure
I don't like the graham cracker crust. And I don't like the dark chocolate. I have to use milk chocolate.
You need to turn it off.